We spend a lot of time talking about the big players, the industries that are always in the news.
Yeah, for sure.
But there's a pretty big shift happening in a market that you might not be as familiar with.
Okay.
Non-alcoholic steatohepatitis,
Hmm.
or NASH for short.
Right.
So think of it this way, like a serious stage of fatty liver disease.
Yeah.
But it's not from alcohol.
Right.
It's often tied to things we hear a lot about, like obesity and type 2 diabetes.
Absolutely. Yeah, those are becoming increasingly common.
And for this deep dive, we've got a recent market analysis report that really breaks down the global NASH market.
Yeah, this is a big one.
And it's got forecasts and, regional breakdowns.
All that good stuff.
So the goal here is to really look at this data with you to understand not just the numbers,
Right.
but what they mean.
Exactly. Yeah. What's the story behind the number?
What they mean about this rapidly changing area.
For sure. For sure.
So to give you an idea of the scale we're talking about. Okay.
This report estimates that back in 2025, the global NASH market was already at $940 million US.
Wow. That's already pretty substantial.
Big, yeah.
Yeah.
But get this, projections show it ballooning to $52,225.27 million US by 2033.
That's huge growth.
That's a compound annual growth rate, or CAGR,
right,
of 23.20%.
That's incredible.
So what's driving this huge surge? Let's find out.
Yeah, let's get into it. So starting with that global picture, almost $10 billion back in 2025.
Yeah.
Not small potatoes.
No.
And that projected 23.2% CAGR really shows how fast this market is growing.
Yeah. The
report is pretty clear that the main things pushing this growth are the rising rates of obesity and type 2 diabetes.
Yeah, makes sense.
Worldwide, we're seeing this trend. It's really a direct result of some pretty big global health trends.
And when we look at this market geographically,
it gets pretty interesting.
Okay.
North America in 2025 had the biggest share. It was over 40% of the global revenue, with a market size of $640.8 million US.
That's a big chunk.
Big, yeah. And it's not slowing down.
Okay.
Projected to grow at a CAGR of 21.5% between 2025 and 2033.
So still strong growth.
Still very strong growth.
Yeah.
Now, what's interesting is when you zoom in on North America, to the country level, the U.S., not surprisingly, is leading. Yeah,
I would guess that.
$872.59 million US in 2025.
Wow.
And a solid 21.3% CAGR.
Healthy growth there.
Yeah. But Canada, with 436.9 zillion, is actually expected to grow a little faster.
Oh, interesting.
At 22.3%. And Mexico is not far behind, 331.31 million, with a 22.0% CAGR.
So widespread growth.
This growth across the board really shows how widespread these metabolic health challenges are.
Yeah, it's definitely not just limited to one country.
All across the continent?
Across the board, yeah.
Then there's Europe. In 2025, it was over 30% of the global revenue.
Okay.
That's $853.60 million US.
Another big slice of the pie.
Very significant.
Yeah.
And within Europe, Germany really stands out.
Okay.
565.01 million.
Wow.
And a projected CAGR of 22.3%.
Healthy growth there, too.
The UK is next with 479.40 million. And an even higher CAGR of 22.9%.
Oh, wow. Interesting.
France, Italy, Russia, and Spain also have big markets, each a couple $100 million. Right. And all with CAGRs over 21%.
So it really shows that NASH is a big deal across a lot of different countries in Europe.
Yeah, both in terms of health and economics.
For sure. The costs associated with it are significant.
Now, here's where it gets really interesting.
Okay, I'm intrigued.
North America and Europe, they're the big players right now.
Yeah.
But the Asia-Pacific region, APAC, that's where the fastest growth is happening. So in 2025, APAC had about 23% of the global revenue.
Okay.
Market size was $2,361.60 million. But its projected CAGR, from 2025 to 2033 is a whopping 26.3%.
Whoa, that's a lot faster than the other regions.
That's a huge jump.
Yeah.
So that 26.3% CAGR for APAC really shows how the global landscape is shifting.
Yeah, for sure.
China already had a pretty big market in 2025, 991.87 million. And it's expected to grow at 25.8%.
Still really strong.
But it's India that's really taking off.
Okay.
236.16 million in 2025.
Right.
And the highest CAGR of all the major countries we've talked about at a remarkable 28.2%.
Wow, that's really impressive.
This huge growth in APAC, it's not just about the rising rates of NASH.
Right.
You also have to think about the changes in diet happening in a lot of these developing economies.
That's true, yeah.
Moving towards more westernized food.
More processed foods, yeah.
More processed food. And maybe less awareness about NASH.
Right. Potentially less early diagnosis, too.
And later diagnosis than in North America or Europe.
Yeah, yeah.
So it's like a perfect storm for NASH.
Yeah, definitely creates the conditions for it to become more prevalent.
And for the market to grow.
For sure, for sure.
And the other regions, they might be starting from a smaller place right now in terms of market share, but they're also showing a lot of potential for growth.
Okay.
So South America, over 5% share, $373.92 million US dollars in 2025.
Right.
Projected to grow at a CAGR of 24%.
It's still really good.
The Middle East, around 2% share, $393.60 million. Slightly higher CAGR, 24.7%.
Okay.
And even Africa, around 1% share, $216.48 million.
Right.
Is looking at a solid 23.5% CAGR.
So even though the markets are smaller right now, the growth rates are still very strong.
Yeah.
It shows that, more and more people are recognizing NASH as a global problem.
Yeah.
And these markets they're set to grow a lot in the next few years.
It's not just a North American or European issue.
No, not like
Brazil and Saudi Arabia, for example.
Right.
Those are showing really strong individual growth rates.
Yeah, yeah. Some really interesting things happening in those markets.
Now, the report also looks at the market by drug type outlook. And it seems like one category is going to be really important.
Okay.
Obeticholic acid or OCA.
OCA, right. I've heard of that one.
So the report says OCA is probably going to be a dominant player in the market.
Yeah.
And that's mainly because it's already pretty far along in development.
Makes sense, yeah. Further along in the pipeline.
OCA is what's called an FXR agonist.
Right, right.
So it targets liver inflammation and fibrosis, which is basically scarring of the liver.
Right.
A key part of how NASH progresses.
Yeah.
The report highlights some promising results from clinical trials showing that it can reduce liver fat and improve fibrosis.
So that's really encouraging.
Which makes it a leading contender in the treatment landscape.
Yeah, for sure. If it can actually reverse some of that damage, that's a big deal.
And right behind OCA, in terms of expected growth, is seraglitazar.
Seraglitazar, okay.
So what makes this one different?
Yeah.
In this crowded field of potential treatments.
Lots of options being explored.
The report says seraglitazar is the fastest growing segment. And that's because of its unique way of working.
Right.
It's both a PPAR alpha and a PPAR gamma agonist.
Oh, interesting. So it's got a two-pronged approach.
So it targets both the buildup of fat in the liver and the inflammation that comes with it.
Right. Tackling both sides of the problem.
And clinical trials have shown it can improve liver enzymes and reduce fibrosis.
That's great.
Making it another very promising treatment option.
For sure. Sounds like it has the potential to really make a difference.
And it's helping to drive the market growth.
Yeah. With results like that, it's easy to see why.
Now, the report also mentions aramchol and elafibranor in the drug type outlook. It doesn't go into as much detail as for OCA and seraglitazar.
Right.
But just mentioning them shows that there are more potential drug therapies being researched.
Yeah, it's good to see that there are multiple avenues being explored.
More options on the horizon.
Definitely, yeah. You always want to have a diverse pipeline.
So OCA and seraglitazar, they're in the spotlight now because of how much progress they've made and how much they're expected to grow.
They're kind of leading the pack right now.
But these other drug types, they could be the next big advancements.
Yeah, absolutely. It's still early days for some of these.
There are options down the line.
Definitely. The research is constantly evolving.
Now, if we shift gears a little bit, the market is also divided by application outlook. And it looks like treatment has the biggest share right now.
That makes sense.
Yeah.
I mean, it's a medical condition.
Yeah.
People need treatment.
So, it needs some sort of intervention.
Right. Got to do something about it.
The fact that treatment is the biggest segment shows just how important it is to manage how the disease progresses.
Yeah, absolutely. You want to stop it from getting worse.
And what's really interesting here is that the report says there aren't any FDA-approved drugs specifically for NASH right now.
So there's a big gap there.
So, there's a big opportunity here.
Yeah, for sure. If you can develop a treatment that works and gets approved, that's a huge market.
For new treatments.
Absolutely, yeah.
Like GLP-1 receptor agonists and FXR agonists.
Those are some of the promising ones, right?
Which are being actively developed.
Yeah, lots of research going on in those areas.
It's like a race to find a solution.
It is, yeah. A race to find something that really works.
For this unmet medical need.
Because right now, there's not a great solution.
And the other important application area is diagnosis.
Right.
And the report says it's growing really fast.
That's interesting. So it's not just about treating it, it's also about figuring out who has it.
Yeah. So what's driving that growth on the diagnostic side?
So the fast growth in the diagnosis segment, it's really important.
Yeah.
It's being driven by the fact that more and more people are using non-invasive diagnostic tools.
Okay.
Think about things like FibroScan,
Yeah.
MRI, PDFF, and all sorts of blood-based biomarkers.
Right.
These new technologies, they can help doctors detect NASH early on.
Yeah.
They can track how it's progressing.
Right.
And they can help categorize patients.
Okay.
All without having to do a liver biopsy.
Right, which can be pretty invasive.
Which is a big deal because liver biopsies are invasive and often expensive.
Yeah.
So as more people become aware of NASH,
yeah,
and these non-invasive methods become more common and easier to get,
yeah,
this segment is naturally going to grow a lot.
makes sense.
Yeah.
So we've talked about the market size
Mm-hmm.
and how it's spread out geographically.
Yep.
So what's really pushing this market forward? What are the big market drivers that the report talks about?
So the report points out a few key drivers. First off, there's more awareness about NASH now,
Yeah.
both among regular people and healthcare professionals.
Right.
And there are more efforts to diagnose it early.
Yeah.
So as more people understand NASH,
Yeah.
and it becomes easier to diagnose early on,
Uh-huh.
naturally the demand for effective treatments goes up.
Makes sense.
Yeah.
If you know you have a problem, you want to fix it.
Exactly. Yeah.
Secondly, there are all these advancements happening in drug development.
Oh, yeah, that's a big one.
That's huge.
Yeah.
So all these new therapeutic approaches
Yeah.
and the good results we're seeing from clinical trials,
Right.
they're creating more potential treatment options.
Which is really exciting, yeah. It gives
Yeah.
people hope.
Yeah. And that's stimulating market growth.
For sure. For sure. If there's a potential cure on the horizon, that's going to drive investment in research.
And lastly, there's more investment in healthcare overall.
Right.
And governments are doing more to improve access to diagnosis and management of NASH.
Yeah, those policies can make a big difference.
So all of that's helping the market grow.
Absolutely, yeah.
Yeah.
All those factors combined create a really fertile ground for growth.
But are there any big challenges or roadblocks
Yeah, good question.
that could slow this growth down?
Yeah, so the report does point out a couple of things that could hold the market back.
Okay.
One is the cost of some of the advanced diagnostic tests.
Right.
They can be pretty expensive.
Yeah.
And that, along with the fact that a lot of people still don't know much about NASH,
Right.
can make it hard to diagnose early
Yeah.
and to get people the management strategies they need.
So lack of awareness is still a big problem.
It is, yeah. It's a barrier to early intervention.
The other big challenge is that right now there aren't any fully approved drug therapies.
Right, so even if you diagnose it, there's not necessarily a guaranteed solution yet.
So there's a lot of promising research happening,
Yeah,
but not having those FDA-approved treatments
yeah.
does limit the options people have.
It does, yeah. And it could slow down market growth
Yeah.
until those therapies get approved and become widely available.
But even with those challenges,
Yeah.
the report points to some important market trends
Okay.
that are shaping the future.
They're kind of pointing the way forward.
So one of the biggest trends
Yeah.
is that there's more focus on developing even better non-invasive diagnostic tools.
Oh, yeah. That makes sense.
The goal is to find a good alternative to liver biopsies
Right. Something that's easier and less risky for patients.
that are less invasive,
Yeah.
more practical,
Yeah.
for screening more people and monitoring the disease.
Exactly, yeah. You want something that you can use on a larger scale.
And the other big trend is that there's more investment in creating new therapies,
Okay.
especially drugs that target liver fibrosis directly.
So going right to the source of the problem.
And address the metabolic problems that are connected to NASH.
Yeah, tackling it from multiple angles.
So this shows that there is a real need for new treatments.
Yeah, for sure.
And that the disease is complex.
Very complex, yeah.
And finally, the report gives us a quick look at the competitive landscape.
Okay.
So what's the main takeaway there?
So the key point about the competitive landscape is that it's a really busy space.
Yeah.
Lots of players.
Lots of activity.
There are lots of big pharmaceutical companies.
Yeah.
And they're investing a lot of money in developing new drugs.
Okay.
And they're focusing on things like GLP-1 receptor agonists, FXR agonists, and PPAR agonists.
Right.
Each of these targets a different part of how NASH works.
So different approaches.
Yeah, different ways to attack the problem.
The report also mentions Madrigal Pharmaceuticals.
Okay.
And their positive phase 3 trial results for their drug resmetirom.
Oh, yeah, I read about that. That was a big deal.
As a really important development.
Yeah.
It could be a turning point because it's the first phase 3 study in NASH.
Right.
That didn't just rely on liver biopsy to choose patients and to see if the treatment worked.
Right. They use different methods to evaluate the drug's effectiveness.
So this could pave the way for treatments that are easier to access.
Yeah.
And can be used for more people.
That would be a huge step forward.
So to sum it all up,
this
deep dive into the NASH market report
Yeah.
shows us that this is a market that's already big. And it's going to grow a lot in the coming years.
Like explode.
Yeah, huge growth potential.
Yeah.
We saw how the growth rates are different in different regions.
Right.
With the Asia-Pacific region leading the way.
APAC is really taking off.
The pipeline of new drugs looks really good.
Yeah, lots of promising research happening.
And the focus on non-invasive diagnostic tools is really important.
Absolutely, that's a game changer.
So this market is growing.
Yeah.
Because of the rise in health problems like obesity and diabetes.
Right, those are the underlying drivers.
But also because of the progress in medical research and the investments being made in healthcare.
For sure. For sure. All those factors are contributing to the growth.
And this brings up a really interesting question.
Okay.
You know, there's a strong link between NASH and lifestyle factors.
Right.
Like what you eat and how active you are.
Things you can control to some extent.
So what does this big market growth tell us about society?
That's a good question.
And public health.
It's not just about the money.
It's not just about the money.
It's a reflection of something bigger.
It makes you think about the bigger picture.
Definitely, yeah. It raises some important questions about the choices we're making as a society and how those choices are impacting our health.
And the burden this condition could place on healthcare systems.
Yeah, for sure. It's something to think about.
It's something to consider.
Definitely.